and it starts counting up, I hit this little magic button right here. Then I know how long we were talking. There's absolutely no formality to this. Like, I have no agenda. I have no script that I'm going from. I don't even have a name for the show.
Yeah.
Like, I just call up my friends that know a lot about airplanes, and I'm like, hey, let's sit down and talk like we always do.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you and I get together, you either have to shut me up with like, hey, I got a text message, I got to go, or I'm like, dude, I got to get back to work, because we blow through probably a good hour of just comparing notes every time we get together and talk, which is awesome. And every time we get done, I'm like, oh, I wish I had that on tape.
Right. Solving the world's problems, right?
Well, I mean, that's part of it. But the thing I noticed about you right out of the gate was that you had, like, there's an accepted view of aviation that people have. If that comes through on the audio, that's going to be freaking cool.
That's airplane noise. We're at the airport.
That's why we do this. Like, some people have this like prescribed, accepted view of how the world should fly, and it's kind of been spoon-fed to them. And then there's other people that have seen behind the curtain the functional, usable way to fly. And when you and I started hanging out and talking, and you get to know somebody just a little bit at a time, I realized that you were the other kind of pilot. You were you were not necessarily the, well, 91 chapter verse says. Like, you knew that. I knew you knew that because you were a smart pilot, but there was more to it that, if you were in the right circles, you would let on. And, because we use different ways to talk to people.
Right.
We definitely don't tell our passengers everything. But when you're around somebody that understands the language and the other side of flying, you open up a little bit, and you did. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. And here I am doing all the talking. But
well, we had talked about that, at one time. Oh, doing some cowboy flying. Well, not cowboy flying. It's just how we fly.
Exactly. It's not, and it gets tagged that way. So I want to ask you, and I've wanted to ask you this ever since, like, the whole reason that I asked you to come and sit down and tape this is because what I wanted to ask you was, where did your flying start? Because my theory is that, if your flying starts from, I don't know, I want to say from a spoon-fed's the wrong word, from a regulated standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't really know why you're getting into aviation, and suddenly somebody's saying, well, you're getting into aviation because here's the FARs, here's the book, here's the things, this is what a pilot is, you don't really have a preset starting point, and so that's your starting point. You go, oh, well, this is what a pilot is.
Yeah.
But if you have a background, it's a little bit different.
Right.
I want to know what your background is.
So, you meet different pilots. You all, in certain ways, can relate and get along. Like, we've all had a similar path, but, what got us started? What was our interest, right? Was it just the sound of airplanes, the look of airplanes, being at the airport kind of thing? And a lot of it, I think, can relate, at least for some of us, and for me, growing up in Alaska, you're always around airplanes. There's more airplanes than there are people, and they're everywhere, right? And so you get to be around airplanes all the time, see them, ride on them. It's just part of the community up there.
So, yes and no, because I got plenty of Alaskan friends that could not care less. Like, an airplane to them is just a necessary thing to do.
Yeah.
But clearly it hit deeper with you, with me. do you remember the first time that you were like, oh, this is a thing, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, my grandfather, well, I guess both on my mother's side and dad's side, they had airplanes,
Right.
and so was exposed to them from being very young. My dad had interest in aviation, was working on getting his private license, so we would always spend time down at the airport. I mean, shoot, I bet by the second grade I could tell you the difference between a Piper and a Cessna, right? And but did I know I was going to be involved in aviation at that? No, it was just something that was fun. Maybe at some point, maybe a hobby, but it wasn't probably until I was in high school. I said,
That's when it sparked.
Yeah.
What happened? Like, where were you in high school?
Yeah. So once was in high school, I got a part-time job working at the airport, pumping gas, working line.
Down here or up there?
Yeah, actually, it here at Nolan, Dakota Flying Service.
I gotta turn myself up a little bit,
Yeah.
I think. But you started in Alaska.
I did, yeah, at a Birchwood Municipal, out just outside of Eagle River, in between Anchorage and.
So when
and
did the
Matsu
transition
Valley.
occur between up there and down here? Like,
It happened in high school there. I think when I was 16 is when I actually took my very first flight that was able to log, and that was out of Birchwood there.
so you actually got to do, like, it sparked up there, and then you had to come down here and then
Right.
figure out how to integrate. Did you notice a difference going from there to down here?
I think so, because now, you're trying to learn how to fly and pay for it,
Right.
And so now you got to work,
Right.
And so you have to figure that one out. You work for 40 hours and fly for 2, kind of thing, right?
That was absolute garbage. I hated, like, I wanted to work and fly hour for hour.
Yeah, no, don't
No,
work like that.
it's
No.
it's such an indentured servitude. You scrape and scrounge and beg,
Yep.
borrow and steal, and then you get 10 minutes, and it's the worst. And then you go
Yep.
talk to some old guy on the field who's, and he goes, well, I learned to fly in 43, and I pumped gas, and I soloed in 3 hours, and I'd work all day, and then I'd get to fly all afternoon. And I'm going, that's not fair.
It's even less so now,
Yeah.
right? Now you got to work 80 hours and fly 2.
Oh, good grief. So what was the role of flying up there in Alaska versus the role of flying down here? Did you grow up in a hobby flying family, or did you grow up in an air taxi family up there?
No, in fact, on my mother's side, my grandfather owned several airplanes. He learned to fly in a little mall, upgraded to a 310, sold the 310, bought a 414, and he used it for business. He went all over the place.
He was just his own pilot.
He was
running around up there.
Yeah, he did some work with the oil industry as the pipeline was getting implemented, and all the refineries all starting up there. So he
Was
used
he
it
just
for
using
business.
was he using it just Part 91, but using
Yeah.
it for okay?
Yeah, so it was going between. I mean, he had a house in Washington, and
Okay.
Kenai, and out in the valley, and then had family down in California and New Mexico and that area. So he was going between Anchorage and Fairbanks and
Just
all the
burning
way
up
down south.
avgas, using it as much as he could.
Yeah, and
Doing his own instrument flying.
Yeah,
Or-
in fact, he wasn't even instrument
He had
rated.
a 414.
A 414. Yeah, he was just VFR only.
And then your dad got into it.
Yeah. He was. I don't think he ever finished his private, but he was interested in it and did some flying.
What? So back to you, because all of this filters down. You're seeing this. You're keeping track of this. To some extent, it seems pretty normal, especially being up in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, there's a lot of kids that grow up doing this nonsense that are just like, hey, you know what? I'm into cars.
Right.
I'd rather buy a sailboat, and you're like, sign me up, learn to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So let me lead this concept a different way. Like, I grew up in flying as well. Like, I grew up on the other side of it. I grew up watching the 135 side of it. Like, flying in my family was not a hobby. Like, nobody did it for fun. Flying was fun, but we didn't do it for fun. And I had to come down here too. Like, I got to see the difference between Alaska and the lower 48 in terms of flying. And when I got into flying, I was like, oh, it's different here than I remember it being up there. Did you notice much of I wouldn't say a discrepancy between, because it's not discrepant, but did it seem like you were learning a different set of standards, rules, ways of, handling things than you remembered seeing modeled to you up there? Or did you even have anything modeled to you up there?
I don't think so. I was pretty young up there, so I mean, you just you live around it, but it wasn't that it was work, right?
Right.
That you had to fly. It was just like, oh, okay, well, it sure beats driving.
Yeah. Well, up there it is the car.
Yeah.
Up there it is. I mean, the thing I always say is down here, roads were built everywhere because that was the mode of transportation. So if you wanted to get from here to the next town, you had to build a road to the next town to use your car.
Right.
And so that was the infrastructure that was designed down here. By the time Alaska was opened up, airplanes existed. They were a thing. And everybody's like, oh, we don't want to build a road to the next town. We can build a runway in this town and a runway in that town, and we're all done building, and the airplane takes care of the rest. And so Alaska, runways everywhere, roads to 6 places.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people got into flying because of that. I mean, did your grandpa, was he stoked on flying, or was it just necessary and an investment, and the mall will get the job done, but the 310 will do it faster, and the 414 will do it even faster, so we're just, making smart moves here? Or was he like, hey, I have enough money to own a fast airplane now, this is really fun?
Well, it grew in steps, right? And I don't know, if you have enough money to have an airplane, do you have someone else fly, or do you fly? I think
right.
that makes the difference. And is aviation more of a passion, or is it more of just an efficiency involved in some kind of work?
So what did it seem like for him?
That it was more of a passion. He enjoyed flying. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. When did it shift for you from being fun to being a job? Or did you start out?
No, it's still fun. I guess as a job, as I got older, and for quite a while, as you get older and family demands, like, okay, different hobbies and different goals, and things change, right? And so as you get older and mature and I don't know, grow up in a certain way, and it's like, oh man, did I miss this? I'm going a different avenue in my career, but I still have a passion for aviation. I still want to fly. I still want to develop, learn.
But here's the thing: you are a paid pilot.
Yes.
Like, that is your career now.
Yeah, correct.
You have any idea how many guys are like, I love flying. I learned to fly in high school. I got all my ratings, as many as I could, and then I went and got a responsible job.
Right.
Because
to pay for your flying habit, right?
Yeah.
You've got to have a way to support it.
Well,
until
yeah.
it can support itself, kind of thing, and that can take a long time.
But a lot of guys wash out of the career flying because it doesn't support them.
Right.
Like, they have to make that hard decision. They're like, flying is not paying the bills.
Yeah.
I have to die a little bit inside, let go of my dreams, and write code or be somebody's accountant or do something else
Right.
so that I can fly a little bit on the weekends. You're not flying a little bit on the weekends.
No, no. And I went 10 years between having my private, my instrument, and then finally getting my commercial.
Right.
And in that 10 years, life happens, right?
Did you ever instruct?
I'd never, no, I didn't have to. That is something, I was able to build a lot of my time just, pilot services kind of stuff and having friends with airplanes and just going places with them.
So you literally grew up into the guy that your grandpa would have hired
Yeah.
if he hadn't wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah. Thanks for that, John. Yeah, that's probably a good analogy.
Did you ever growing up, since you were from Alaska, did you ever want to get back up there?
Yeah, there's certain draw up there. Here recently, I spent some time up there this last summer, and that's still, what I refer to, especially with my younger brothers, is the homeland, right?
Yeah.
There's just something about it up there. I brought my family up there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is incredible." Having the mountains around and just the rough country. It's still home.
I grew up there. I know what's there, and every time I go back, there's still just a little bit of shock and awe that happens when you walk out of the Anchorage Air Terminal and just see everything where it is.
Yeah.
And I've never had that experience. I've been to Montana, I've been to Idaho, I've been to all the big places that people go down here.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you why up there just feels so much bigger.
Yeah, it does. It's incredible to see too the amount of growth. And there's population growth everywhere, but especially out there in the valley. Anchorage, you're certain confines of how much growth you can have up there, and then out towards Eagle River, Birchwood, Peters Creek.
Sure.
And then it's just incredible too to see the amount of growth like Wasilla has had. When I lived out there, Palmer was the big city,
right?
And it's almost like stopped in time because there's confines that it can only grow so big. But
eventually,
is really
you
grown.
run into mountains or ocean or something that stops you, and you got to go somewhere else. I grew up in Kodiak, and so everything about me is coastal. The only reason we ever even went to Anchorage was Costco, the hospital, and whenever Dad had to do something for Pen Air.
Got it.
And so that was when we would go to Anchorage. But I go through there every summer on my way to Bristol Bay, and just sitting there looking out the windows, I'm like, this place is massive. When did you? So I'm going to backtrack a little bit here, because at some point you said, okay, I'm putting all my eggs in the flying basket.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you're working two jobs. I don't know. I feel like I work two jobs, even though they're still they're both airplane related. I'm not flying full time. But when I'll frame it this way. One of my friends, he flies. He's the other kind of pilot. He's the kind of pilot that makes enough money from his primary job to pay for his flying habit, and you find those with doctors, lawyers, the highly paid individuals, and then they have an airplane.
Right.
Do they really need an airplane? Probably not.
No.
But they have one, and they fly it, and they enjoy it because they can afford to pay for it. And then there's the other kind of pilot. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but I never wanted to be something else so that I could fly an airplane. I wanted to be a pilot so I could fly an airplane. So, I threw all my eggs in that basket. when did you look at this and go, all my eggs are going in that basket?
Yeah. So, it took some time for that to develop. Having a family, you've got certain responsibilities that you're responsible for, taking care of things. And
How old were you when you started your family?
I was pretty young. I was early 20s.
Oh, okay. And where were you at your flying back then? Like, how far along were you?
Yeah, I didn't even get my commercial until my late 20s, early 30s, in that range there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So your family has been along for this ride as well.
Oh, absolutely. And they've seen me progress through it. They've been involved in check rides. And I think, in a way, I wanted to show my children, like, make goals and pursue them and go after them, and don't just have one goal. Have multiple goals, and progress. And it's going to take hard work and dedication to complete those and follow through with them. But think outside of the norm. And they've watched me. My wife has been outstanding, but they've watched me progress from all the way through it.
I've seen so many guys that your family has to be on board.
Absolutely.
There's lots of guys that get into flying early on and bang out enough flying that by the time they start a family, like, they're established,
right,
and they can continue in the family. Just like dad's always been a pilot.
Yeah, that's not at all what the route that I took.
And the other thing you ramp up against, like, you'll find that guy who will then start a family, and the family will say, "No, you're not flying.
Yeah, right.
You got to stop because you're always gone, or it's dangerous, or you got to be home, 5:00." And I'm not saying those flying jobs don't exist, but I've just never heard of them.
Yeah.
If you're flying, you're just always on.
You're away. I did some of that. You chase a corporate jet or a charter jet around the country, and you do your flying. You build a lot of time, go a lot of neat places, but you're away from home, and that's tough for young families.
If you have a family though that's supportive, or supportive is a stretch. It's really tough to get multiple people on board with that. But at least understanding, I should say, or tolerant of it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can continue. And I've seen so many guys shoot. I would, a few years back, working with a guy, and when you meet a mechanic, you think you're just talking to a mechanic. It doesn't really register that this guy could also be a pilot. I think this happens to me a lot.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, "Oh, you're just a mechanic." Like, what do you mean you know how to fly an airplane? Oh, you're clearly this is your life's work,
Mm-hmm.
being a mechanic. And so we were on a road trip down to do an airplane and start talking, getting to know each other, because it was like my first week on the job. And come to find out, he's multi-commercial, like, all the stuff. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "This is the job that lets me be with my family all the time.
Yeah.
So this is the one I chose." And I can respect that. But it's at the same time, I don't know. I don't know what it's like for you, but with me, airplanes, I wouldn't say I'd throw my family under the bus to choose airplanes. But that'd be a hard one. You know what I mean? For me, because flying has always been the thing that drove me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to meet somebody like that and be like, "Oh, you stopped flying when you could." And especially at that point, like, back when I met him, I didn't have a family. Of course, my perspective has changed a little bit now because I have a family.
Mm-hmm.
But back then I didn't have a family, and I would have given anything to, like, have the credentials to fly everywhere all the time. And so to see somebody that's like, "No, I didn't, I chose not to." I'm like, so you went after it. Clearly, because you're you're now flying. I mean, I guess I probably ought to fill in some blanks here for the people who have no idea what we're talking about. Since we're halfway through the show, you should probably introduce yourself to the people who are listening. Justin Corbin, as far as I know, is well, what is your title?
Yeah, so right now I'm a program manager for a Northwest-based air medevac operator.
There you go. Okay. And so he's involved fairly heavily. Justin is not a hobby pilot. Like I said, you threw all your eggs in that basket. Clearly your family was on board. Your wife must have been stoked about it. And that's, I mean, and that's what you have to have. You absolutely have to. What does your wife do for work, by the way?
She's a homemaker, and so yeah.
So it's all on you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yes. Well, it's and in ways it's all on her, right? It's
right
because she's doing the important job.
That was the house I grew up in too. Is that I mean, is that her training? Is that, I mean, let's just say you didn't have kids and didn't need to make a home. What would she be doing, or would she be?
She did some work in some different like manufacturing aspects around the valley.
Okay.
So,
I just have a theory about pilots, but I won't drag you guys into that one.
Was that the bartender analogy or story there? Right?
No,
hairdresser. What?
No. Okay, I'll just throw it out there for conversation's purpose. One of the things that I've come across so often, you meet a pilot in a service industry much like yourself, and you start talking to him, and it just, probably 7 times out of 10, what does your wife do? Oh, she's a nurse.
Oh, yeah.
A nurse or some sort of medical capacity person. And I've always said that pilots and nurses go together like peanut butter and jelly. There's just something about a service pilot's mindset and a nurse's mindset that they talk the same language. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's funny, and it happens. And now that I've expressed that to you, now you're going to be, thinking about it every time you start talking to new pilots, and oh, what's your wife do? Oh, she's a nurse. So that was why I was just seeing if my stats were still up. But no, you are very fortunate to be in a situation where you can carry your family by yourself with your flying. That's good. That's very good. Especially in this day and age, in this economy.
Oh, absolutely.
So tell me more about your Northwest-based medevac operation employer. We'll leave them unnamed at this point in case there's any complications and
so like
dragging somebody under the bus.
Right, like any other medevac operator, we'd operate a small fleet of PC-12 NGs. And I've become very fond of that aircraft and what it's capable of doing, and especially here in the Pacific Northwest, and the mission that aircraft can service.
How'd you fall into that one? Because everybody's got a transition story, and maybe we need to back up because I am curious. Something happened between, hey, Mom and Dad, I think I want to learn to fly. Mm-hmm. Were they supportive?
Oh, yeah, big time.
They were into it?
Absolutely, yes.
So they're like, okay, we're on board. Let's do this. So you start taking flying. At some point, you're like, okay, I would rather get paid to fly than pay to fly.
Right.
So you went after that. At some point, you said, okay, I'm going to do this for my 100% career. Mm-hmm. what was your wife's reaction when you're like, honey, I'm not going to do a normal, respectable, dependable job. I'm going to be a pilot, which could go anywhere.
Right. So if you're a good attorney or a good doctor or a good accountant,
Right.
then you can be those and have airplanes. But if
Exactly.
you're not, then you got to you work your way into aviation some way, right?
Have you noticed this trend over the years of watching aviation? That I mean, how many pilots do you know that get a job with a flying company and retire with that company, versus how many pilots do you know that worked for company A, company B, company C, company D, back for company A, jumped around, probably all in the same year, 3 different guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and it really depends. Is the person, looking at, are they just building time, or I don't know. You get to a certain point in your career and you're like, man, I've got to stop jumping around like this. I haven't done that, but I've definitely seen, and have seen through different, applications and resumes. Some guys like, 3 months here, 6 months there, and
Right.
a year is a long time. It kind of makes you wonder. The only thing you can think is, maybe they chase an opportunity or money or something, time.
Sometimes I think pilots are a little bit. So this goes back to pilots that don't have necessarily a. What's the word? I've heard this word used for new nurses. They don't really have a focal point, or I guess an acclimatization for really what to do with an airplane, with a job, with a career. Like, because aviation is one of those things where if you're a pilot, that's very vague.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's like being a doctor. What kind of doctor are you? Are you an orthopedic surgeon?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a family doctor? Are you a pediatrician? Are you a foot doctor? There's so many things you can do. And so if somebody is just a doctor without a specialization, and in aviation, I don't think we really do that versus how they do in the medical community, where they make you declare and
Right.
Study and everything. Once you're a commercial pilot, have fun.
Yeah.
Like, go figure it out. And I think a lot of pilots are like, oh, well, do I want to huck jumpers? Do I want to tow gliders or banners? And those are kind of time build things. Do I want to be a flight instructor? Not really, but I need the time. Do I want to fly cargo? Do I want to be an airline guy? And I've seen guys not really know what they want to do and flail around trying to figure it out. And I think that's what you might see on your resumes.
Yeah, you see that. From, and normally there's a progression. Okay, what do guys do in the build time? Okay, are they doing the flight instruction route? And then, okay, do they do the skydiver or some kind of agriculture or something?
Have you ever done any of those?
I've flown skydivers before, years ago. But
what was your major time builder?
mostly just pilot services.
And what do you mean by that? Like,
So just
once you got your commercial,
guys that have airplanes, and friends that have airplanes. Hey, you want to go watch Mariners game, or hey, you want to go down to Southern California or something like that.
so you're kind of in and I didn't know this about Yakima, because this definitely does not exist in Walla Walla, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently there's a bunch of guys around here with airplanes that they need flown, and they need a pilot to fly them, but they're not really either comfortable, capable, or qualified to do the flying themselves, so they just hire somebody to come do that.
Yeah. In fact, there's a good portion of my logbook that it's at night and in the weather, because they could fly VFR and fly in any type of good weather. But when it got dark out, late at night, type flying, or, the weather was a little bit iffy for them, they'd be like, hey.
What great experience for you, just being handed literally the worst type of flying to do and figure it out. And did you ever... early on, did you feel like you were in over your head maybe, or did you just pick your trips and kind of progress? I mean,
No, I mean, I've had some great instructors and friends along the way. Always there's, different flights. Like, okay, I learned this about, myself and the airplane
yeah.
and the area, time of year and that kind of thing. But nothing that was like, look back and be like, man, why did I become a pilot? Because I put myself in this situation. Nothing like that.
Who mentored you through this? I mean, through this kind of a thing. Were you just kind of out on your own, figuring it out as you went, or did you have somebody that you could call up, draw, experience from, and say, hey, I have this trip to do this way. Give me some input. Like,
yeah, and some of the friends and flight instructors that I've had in the past, they've flown some of the same airplanes, with some of the same people.
So you were connected.
Same missions. Yeah, that's what it's all about. Is the networking that some of the guys here at the
it's
airport.
huge.
Yeah, and in fact, that's ultimately what led me into making that shift from just flying here or there and building time over 10, 15 years.
Right.
And then kind of making that more of a professional flying jump from just a hobby.
One of the reasons that I'm actually doing this podcast, I hate calling it a podcast. It just feels like the dumbest thing. But one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast is to provide that mentoring somehow to people that don't otherwise get it. If you had that, you were in a great position, a great community of pilots and flyers. And I see so many kids now coming up through flying that have the qualifications without either a direction or somebody to talk to. And they're just boring a hole through the sky for the first time going, I hope this works. My training should be enough. Instead of having somebody that they can draw from and say, have you done this before? Is there anything I need to know? And just networking that way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for instance, spending time at the FBO before I came down here, you just chit-chat with the flight instructors down there. I mean, they've got guys down there anywhere between 600 hours and 1,300 hours. And guess what? Hey, we've all been in that situation.
And there's something they know. And just for you to have your presence around there, they know who you are and they know what kind of flying you do. Guaranteed, if I was a flight instructor building time and somebody like you came into the FBO, I would literally talk your ear off.
Oh yeah, that's what every time I go in there, asking some of the guys after time, a little while, like, hey, where you at on hours?
Yeah,
because we got to have 2,500 hours to get you into a PC-12, and it's fun just chatting with them. And even on the trip before I came down here, we were talking about some of the guys are looking at doing some 91 stuff and in citations and
cool.
Excels and 500 series stuff, but talking about avionics and hey, if you want one of these days, if you got a student, it's learning about autopilot stuff or synthetic vision or some kind of glass cockpit aspect, bring them over. It's nothing to hook one of these PC-12s up or a Lear 45 up to external power and boot up the avionics system and have someone look at some different buttons and switches and talk systems and what this does. And actually got a couple of the instructors attention over there, like, yeah, we've got some students, maybe some bad weather day this winter or something like that, we could bring them over and show them, hey, we go from a 172 to something else. This is what we're going to be looking at.
To be able to see it in a functional standpoint, or to see just to have an end goal.
Right. Yeah, kind of, get some interest in some of these guys that are
so you're throwing
guys
a
or
carrot
gals.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the airplane's right next door, and all the guys that are guys and gals that are involved with the medivac program. I mean, we love to talk airplanes. So why not bring someone that's, new into their flying career, maybe only 20, 30, 60 hours or something like that, bring them over and show them a different machine, because we've all been there. We've all been where they're at.
You're doing exactly what I was talking about, trying to give people a perspective. Here's one aspect of it. How often do they? Because we've had firefighters here on the airfield. Do they come down there and hang out? Do you know?
Not regularly, but I think COVID has something to do with that. But
Yeah,
they're
I've
kind of
heard
always
that.
on standby if we ever needed their help, and we've called them a handful of times. If we need help with a patient or something like that.
Oh no, I
come
mean,
down.
I mean the water bombers.
Oh, actually, a couple
seat
of them just
drivers.
showed up there, but yeah, the yellow ones haven't showed up, but we've
No,
got
the
some
yellow
different
ones.
ones.
The yellow ones were cool. I love
Yeah.
those things.
No, but they just had a couple of them. That was one reason I was late. They had
Oh.
a couple driving in on the ramp, fueling up.
Oh, cool.
Guess they were fighting a fire up on White Pass today.
The thing I wish these kids had, we make fun of them, and we really shouldn't. We should encourage them a little more. But these children of the purple line, I know you've heard that statement. I just wish they had more. I was talking about this in my last conversation. More to go on than just fly A to B. And there's something to be said for the ability to plan a trip, plan it safely, navigate it, fly it accurately. That type of accomplishment is, it feels good. But there are more types of flying. You know this from growing up in Alaska. It's not just A to B. It's not just 6,000 feet. Sometimes it's other kind of flying. Otherwise, we wouldn't have ag operators. We wouldn't have helicopter pilots. We wouldn't have aerobatic pilots. I mean, there's so much more to flying. I mean, even medivac pilots have a different way of, just a different attitude and way of doing things, I think, than airline drivers.
Right.
What's your, not to, you can answer this any way you want. I don't want you to give yourself away or give up information that might, you may be holding in your, close to your chest or anything, but, what's your, have you made a semi-permanent decision about the type of flying that you enjoy doing, want to do, and will do for the remainder of your career, or do you still feel like there's another type of flying you want to do? Like, are you a medevac pilot that might want to fly airlines later? Do you feel like you should have done a different type of flying, or do you feel like you've really found your niche and you enjoy this?
Yeah, I think progressing through all the different type of flight training, I never really caught the regional or airline bug. Always wanted to do something around corporate aircraft management, something along those lines.
Okay.
Maybe more on the private side. The time I've spent doing medevac work, I've really enjoyed this. This type of work. One, we fly some incredible machines into some incredible areas. We have more of kind of the adventure flying aspect of it. We can go IFR, we can go VFR, where maybe a different part of medevac. If it's just turbine type. Jet operations, they're going, IFR everywhere, point A to point B type flying. We're like, how do we get up to Tonasket, Washington? Okay, well, there's certain guidelines on weather we need to have. Do we go shoot an approach into OMAC, fly an IFR departure out of wherever we're going, fly an IFR approach? We have certain weather, visibility and ceilings. Okay, well, we're authorized. We can cancel and go to another airport up that valley. Very unique type flying, right? And I enjoy that, and I think a lot of us that do that type of work really enjoy that machine and the mission that we can that we can fly with that machine. And even some of the airline guys that have been flying with us, they've had a pretty structured and regiment flying career, and they really like this type of flying.
It's
a great balance.
It's less scripted.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, yeah, you can go over to Seattle and you go through Bravo and everything's IFR, and
Yep.
that's everything's scripted about that. All right, do you get a north turn or a west turn over what are we doing? Over there, that's maybe not. That could be a little off script or a little different, but over there it's pretty predictable, right?
Right.
But we can go into some of these underserviced communities that they don't have the healthcare system, they don't have
Right.
the support, and so someone's having a bad day somewhere. If we're getting a call,
Right.
and we can go pick them up and take them somewhere where they can get the help they need.
So, let me ask you this question. I'm gonna back up to what you were talking about, OMAC and Tenasket. When we say unscripted flying, there's 496 different types of pilots, but I'm going to talk about two of them. The one type of pilot that is very comfortable with the script, wants the script, wants, if we're doing a VFR flight, it's scripted. We have a point of departure, point of landing, going to talk to flight following the whole way. They're basically flying VFR as if it was an IFR clearance, but they're scripting themselves. And usually those people transition into the point-to-point IFR environment. When you try to drag them into what you're talking about, the type of flying that you're talking about, where you might get into a situation where you have to go off script to get the job done. And I don't mean cowboying it, making up your own rules. But you have to look at the tools that you're given and see if you can utilize them. So back to the OMAC Tenasket thing, I want to clarify, because this sounds really cool to me and my type of flying that I'm interested in. You mentioned trying to go into Tenasket, but it sounded like you were saying using OMAC to do it. Shooting an approach into OMAC, but not landing in OMAC so that you could fly to Tenasket. Is that what you're...
Yeah, correct.
And just to anybody listening, we're not talking about shooting an approach in OMAC down to 250-foot minimums, breaking out and then scud running our way to Tenasket. No. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is utilizing an approach to get from an IFR environment to a VFR environment, which you can do, and then flying VFR to the airport under safe VFR conditions that you wouldn't be able to get to under IFR. Like, there's no approach into Tenasket as far as I know.
No. You go to Republic or Twisp or Chelan, there's very minimal IFR infrastructure up there.
And there's lots of pilots who would look at that situation and say, I have to go to Tenasket. And then say, there's no approach to Tenasket. I can't go to Tenasket. Right. And that's the end of the script. They wouldn't look at, like you're saying, what about this one? What about this one? What about this one? We can IFR to any one of these places. Then can we get to where we need to go under different conditions? Right. What you're talking about is working an airplane. And there's... and this is what I mean when I say I wish this type of mentorship was out there for these new pilots coming up, because I don't think they understand that this is an aspect of flying that you can cultivate, that you can understand, that you can start, playing around with in order to get a job done. I think it's stinking cool that you are in the medivac environment. And when you came to me, because I knew you before medivac was a thing. I knew you when you were still flying Saratoga and Bonanza and whatever IFR for the guys who didn't have their IFR or didn't have their instrument rating. You were doing that. And then you'd bring an airplane to me for maintenance and you'd say, oh yeah, well I'm jumping in the citation and I'm going, well, good for you. And then pretty soon you transition over to the PC-12.
Yeah.
And when you did that, you never really told me how you felt about it. Like, I think your expression was, well, it's a good job, based on the conversations that you and I had before any of that. When you said, I'm going to go fly medevac, I was stoked for you because I knew what kind of attitude you had just in our conversations, that you wanted to take care of people, that you wanted to work an airplane instead of just hand me the script. Okay, I can't do that. I'm going home, So that's the end of my point.
Yeah.
But
no, and there's some things that, hey, can we do that type of flying? Well, it all depends on 135. What do your op specs allow? What's the weather allow? Mostly, is it wintertime? Do we have runway condition report? A lot of things go into making those decisions on doing those type of flights that are not completely scripted. But I mean, just like you can go IFR on a good weather day. Okay, well, you're in the system. You're talking to people. You're flying the proper routes and departures and arrivals and approaches.
So where did you get the idea to start doing that type of flying versus just the scripted flying?
Well, that came with just doing some of that that medevac operation.
Was it something you picked up from other pilots? Was it something that was just inherent to
your?
your?
I mean, we've got a great pilot base, and some of them have been flying in this region their entire flying career. And of course, you go to them and hey, how do we go and get some of these things done? And a lot of them, okay, we'll reference these op specs, and okay, we have certain guidelines to follow for minimum visibilities and ceilings to be able to get into some of these airports. So, I mean, you just piece the puzzle together and reach out to people that have done it in the past and make sure all the boxes are checked before you go do stuff like that.
Who do you remember learning the most from? Because everybody has somebody that they can say, that's the guy that taught me what I know. And you don't have to say names, but do you have somebody like in mind, like, either you right seated with this guy, or it was somebody that you grew up with talking to all the time? Maybe your grandpa, maybe your dad. I don't know.
Well, no, but, like I said earlier on, we've got a great pilot group here out of the Yakima Airport. Had some good flight instructors, and some of them still keep in contact with over years, and some of them still flying out of the airport here, and probably a culmination of quite a few of those guys.
Did they put you as somebody when you started flying? We'll say the big iron. More than just the Saratogas or the Bonanzas or the 206s, whatever. When you started jumping in the jets, did they put you with somebody specifically, or did you just have to take potluck? You were going to be with whoever they put you with?
No, I was with a small operator, and I knew one of the pilots really well because actually he was a flight instructor I had in the past. In fact,
cool.
When I was pumping gas at the FBO, he was just getting out of college and starting his flight instruction career, and so we got along really well. Shoot, later on our kids played football together, and that was actually it's all about networking, right?
Right.
That was actually how I got my foot in the door in flying some of the heavier metal.
So you started following him around and flying with him.
Yeah,
primarily.
in fact, once I got my my multi-engine instrument commercial, in fact, that what ended up getting me the inspiration to finally just buck up, get the money together, and go through with this was a phone call from a aircraft owner here in the valley. Just called me out of the blue saying, "Hey, are you qualified to fly my airplane?" It's like, well, I don't have my multi-engine yet, so I can't. Sorry. And I kind of kicked myself, like, man, that was.
I should be ready. Yeah.
I should be ready. That's the King Air opportunity right there.
Yeah.
Which doesn't come around all that often.
No.
And so that was the inspiration. Like, I better go get this done.
Right on.
And then shortly after I did that, I got into a pretty bad ATV accident.
Oh no.
And that's man, it's pretty impressive. How,
is that what's going on with your right leg here? Because either you got shot twice,
no,
or
that's what happens when you jump off a four-wheeler when it's apparently still moving, and
oh no,
get your leg, your ankle, foot ran over. But yeah, that was a double compound fracture of
Holy
the tib
cow.
fib. So I got 2 plates and 9 pins holding my foot on my leg.
Is it still in there?
Yeah.
You still have hardware?
Yep, still have hardware. But I was in external fix for 6 months and thought that when they were talking amputation of my foot, I thought I was going to be done flying.
Oh no.
But
there's some gal flying around without arms. I think you can do it with.
But yeah, specialized aircraft, right? But no, that was a big driving force to get over that, get through that, get better, get healed, get a medical, and start turning this aviation dream from a hobby and a dream to making it a reality.
Did you ever get to a point? This is. I'm shifting gears here. Maybe. Did you ever get to a point in your flying where it started to feel like it was like all your training and learning and experience was starting to pay off and it was getting easy? Like, so let me give you an example. You start flying, flying a 152. All you know is a 152. What did you start in?
Yeah, 152.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is because you and I are part of the old guard that actually got to start in a 152. Everybody now is starting in 172s.
Yeah.
Because all the 152s have been used up and wrecked and nobody wants to seem to get in a 152 anyway. They say, "Oh, it's just a little toy airplane."
I joke around with my old instructor that's still on the field. Like him and I just physically couldn't fit in a 152 anymore.
Except that I bet you guys could because everybody used to, and so we learned in 152s. Do you remember the first time you flew a 172 and how big that airplane felt?
And you step up to a 182 and you're like,
oh, big iron. And
then you get into a 210.
Yeah, it's just massive.
Right.
And so you're stepping up and you're going, oh, this is going to be harder. And you learn that airplane, and then another airplane and another airplane. Do you remember when jumping to another type of airplane where your brain still thinks this is going to be hard, but you do it and you go, oh, it's just another airplane.
Yeah.
Or did that happen so long ago you don't have anything to attach it to?
No, I think even you jump into an airplane you're not familiar with. It's it takes a little bit. You analyze, you look around, but I think that was probably those are the water bombers taking off there. Yeah.
No, those are the CL. I didn't know they were down here.
Yeah. That's why I said I was delayed because a couple of those came in. Not the yellow ones. I think these are the white ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they are the white ones.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about not the float ones. But anyway.
But yeah, with that, it was probably transitioning to like high performance and complex, right? Where you start to transition from fixed gear aircraft to aircraft that are a little bit more powerful and complex, where you start to make that transition in how you think about airplanes.
The time it happened for me, it was I'd never flown a 170, and I was worried that it'd be a little too much airplane, because all I'd flown was small squirrely tail wheel airplanes. So now I'm going to jump in a bigger tail wheel airplane. And as it turns out, apparently Cessna designed a 170 to fly very controllably, very forgivingly. It's a very fun and easy airplane to fly. And I remember going, oh. The joke I always make is a throwback to the TV show Taxi, and I'm not going to explain it to people, but the one-liner I give is, oh, apparently I've had lessons, because it's this thing that happens where you don't realize all of your experience is coming together to add up to the fact that, yes, you do know how to operate this piece of machinery safely, and you can put all of these nuanced experiences together and go, okay, it handles a little bit like a Saratoga, but it looks a little bit like a this, and and you add these things together and go, oh yeah, this does feel familiar. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what that experience was with you. I don't know if it was for you jumping in a King Air or jumping in a PC-12 or flying Citations, but at some point, your brain just clicked over and went, oh yeah, I know how to do this now. For me, it still catches me, because I haven't flown as much as you. For me, it still catches me off guard, and I still think to myself, oh, that's a big airplane. Well, when you and I went and flew the PC-12 together, I was like, this is a big airplane. And then getting in it and flying it, it doesn't feel as big while you're flying it.
Right.
It just does all of the airplane things that you expect it to. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that experience, or has it been so long ago that just all airplanes feel like airplanes to you at this point?
Yeah, small airplanes versus bigger, heavier airplanes. But I had another one of those transitions. Not only after getting used to complex and high performance aircraft, but it was switching from steam gauges to glass. Right. Where you have that happen again. It's like, okay, well, feel more comfortable now with this.
Right.
And even challenge some of the guys sometimes, like, if all you ever flew was the PC-12 or
right.
G1000 stuff, go hop in an airplane that's got a six-pack and go shoot some arcs.
Figure out your scan. Yeah.
And it'll be a challenge, but it'll be a good challenge. It'll make you a better pilot, especially an instrument pilot. Keep up with those proficiencies.
Do you transition back very often?
I do occasionally.
Does it catch you off guard? Like does it take a second for your brain to like?
A little bit. It's like, all right, you start tapping on things, they start working. It's like, okay, here we go. You don't have to do that with the glass, right? It just works or it doesn't.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I get calls. The new generation of pilots. One of the big advantages they have is simulator training.
Yeah.
They either have their own home simulator.
Mm-hmm. Well, I even went down to one of the instructors was showing me the sim they have down there. It's not a motion sim, but just the graphics on it are incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we fired it up and made a couple touch and goes on an aircraft carrier, that kind of thing.
And the thing that's inherent to anything that's computer driven or glass cockpit or any of that, there's no mechanical, I guess the word I'm going to use is drag. There's no lag. There's no precession. There's no, level is always going to be level. heading is always going to be heading, airspeed's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be airspeed because it's digitized. It's,
Yep.
when you're dealing with analog stuff, heading indicator might be a couple degrees off. And worse as the flight goes on. Your attitude indicator might not always sit right at level.
Yeah.
And the phone call I always get from these kids that have either learned on a simulator or flown G1000 is, oh, hey, these steam gauges aren't exact. And I'm like, they're not going to be.
Yeah.
You're going to have
gyro
to
spinning
figure out.
back behind them. Yeah. There's moving parts with these things. They're not just solid state.
And
so.
it's funny because I always give them homework to go do on these things. And sometimes they're right. Sometimes they are broken, and I'm happy to fix them when they are. But I'll send them out on a test flight and have them like test the system through different turns and climbs, descents, and things. And then half the time I don't get a call back because it's not really broken. It's supposed to be that way. Okay. I've had lots of times where I will go get in the airplane and go try to make it fail. I can't make it fail because all my experience is like that's all I have, steam gauges. I think I've flown a G1000 maybe twice. And so I'm very used to nothing lining up, and yet we're still flying in a straight line.
You start flying these more complex airplanes and start having abnormalities. It's like, well, did you try to reboot the airplane?
Did you turn it off and turn it back on?
Yeah. Sometimes it just needs a Control-Alt-Delete reset on it, a power cycle.
If people knew, and I don't know how much we should talk about this to the general public, if people knew that all this fantastical technology that's running these, airplanes, if they really knew what was backing it up, I don't think they'd get in them. Versus some of the old technology that I don't know. But
you still have your old technology for your standby stuff, but some of this new stuff, the redundancy with it is incredible. I mean,
it is.
You've got your channel
is.
A's and B's and your left side versus right side, and so you've got all kinds of redundancy with it.
My father-in-law just recently got his type in the 650 Gulfstream 650, I think, because I'm not versed on the Gulfstream product lines. Like, I kind of lost track of Gulfstream after, they were really predictable: G1, G2, G3, G4, G5, and then they started getting into the 50s, and then I didn't know where things really fell into place. And so I think the 650 is the most recent one.
Yeah, I think it's out of the line. You need the biggest suitcase to fly it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all glass. And by that, I mean, there's not a physical switch to switch. There's a picture of a switch that when you switch it, the switch switches, but you touch it to make it switch. And I looked at that because he was showing me some of this stuff. He brought back, screenshots and whatever. And he was showing me some of how it worked. And I said, what happens when that fails? And he said, oh, it's simple. That switch panel is on this screen. If that screen fails, that switch panel automatically moves over to this screen, and we can just keep switching switches on a different screen. So you're absolutely right. There is so much redundancy built into this that it is. I mean, they would have to make it fail safe. You can't just throw people to the wolves and hope for the best. But at the same time, it still just cracks me up that the first action of troubleshooting is turn it off and turn it back on and see if it starts working again.
Well, it's like PC-12. I mean, the Swiss, they have an incredible engineered aircraft there. When we do check rides, it's okay. We're going to simulate a generator failure. Well, guess what? Not a big deal. Turn generator off. There's your simulation. What happens? Nothing happens. Still operates.
Yeah.
Autopilot's still on. Airplane's running. Maybe the air conditioner kicked off, right? Because it'll auto load shed. All right. Well, turn the screen all the way down so it looks black. All right. What's that mean? Is that AGM failure or a DU failure?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's think about it. Okay. Well, it's a DU failure because if it was an AGM failure, you'd have two screens out, right? Because you got two AGMs, one running one PFD and one running one MFD, and likewise on the other side. And okay, well, how are you gonna go through its screen revision? All right, well, shut it off. There it goes. Now it does a combined screen. You're always gonna have your PFD somewhere, but now you only have one MFD, so now you gotta swap between screens, between your system screen and your IMAP screen. But just very intuitive.
Yeah.
And guess what? The autopilot never kicked off during this entire thing.
Yep.
And so the airplane's flying, you're monitoring, and constantly staying ahead of it.
Yeah. No, we at this point in aviation, we have so many advantages, technological advantages. It's the margin of safety. I mean, aviation, it's always been pushing in a safer direction, either technologically, either from training, and that's one of the reasons that I want to be doing this. Back to why I'm doing this. Growing up, my mentors were my relatives. They all flew. And every time they'd get together, it was nonstop comparing of stories, not to be like who had the better story. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but to me, it felt more like I learned this from this experience, so I can relate this to you, so you don't have to put yourself into the same situation and learn the hard way. Now you can learn the easy way, which is me telling you, and then you can leapfrog off of that and make better decisions, down the line. And so it was always introduced in it was always this atmosphere of, we always want to be doing a better job. We always want to be doing a safer job. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of these stories are funny, they're exciting, but what can everybody learn from this?
Right.
And that's what I want to contribute is, what can I bring to this that makes us safer pilots? And that was one of the things I always appreciated about being able to sit and talk with you. You never had a lackadaisical attitude about what was going on. You always conducted, the information that you conveyed to me was always very professional, very service oriented. Like I said, the fact that you're a medevac pilot now just makes all the sense in the world to me based on your attitude. But
I think we, as just aviators, I mean, we're always learning, right? If it's not a new aircraft or new area, or from each other, right? And that should be promoted. And I think even within, some of the literature that's published out there, that I learned from flying. I bet you could have filled up an entire volume with some of the stories that some of your relatives had talked about. But you learn decision making, and it can be contributed by other people's stories. Like, yeah, okay, probably not going to scud run because at some point the clouds meet the trees, and you're trying to stay in between them, right?
How many times have you been talking to another pilot and comparing stories? Not really voluntarily, but the guy wants to talk to you and to tell you about how cool he is for flying airplanes, and so you're just kind of sitting there, what's the word? Placating him or entertaining, because, and mentally you're going, I'm learning a lot today about what I don't think I want to do in an airplane.
Right. Yeah. There's been a handful of those stories.
This like, just doesn't seem to...
I really don't want to put myself in that situation, right?
And you just kind of want to say to the guy, what did you do again I need to write that down. That doesn't
Yeah.
seem like like good decision making. And then you get other guys where, I mean, there are some pilots I've sat with, where 5 minutes feels like 24 hours of information, and it's the simplest, uh, one of the air attack pilots that I used to work with. In fact, I think he's working for. You've seen the Twin Commander flying around here.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the chief pilot for that operation now.
Okay.
I worked with him about 10 years ago, and we sat down one night at dinner, and he used to be one of the pilots for Continental Airlines, like South Pacific kind of stuff. Like back when Continental was running ADF approaches into South Pacific, like the island is the airstrip kind of places. And he showed me, I wish I had just, taken pictures of the notes that he showed me, because he's literally diagramming on a napkin the simplest way to run these approaches. And at the time, I think I'd gone through about half of my instrument rating. And so I knew what he was talking about. But I remember just in that moment thinking, this is literally 3 hours worth of information given to me in 20 seconds, and you meet those guys, and you leapfrog off of them. I want to, at some point, I want to get you back, and talk more about the kind of stuff that you do from a functional standpoint when you're out there flying, and you're working the airplane. How do you get the job done off script safely?
Mm-hmm.
I want to have those conversations with you at some point.
Yeah.
This isn't a one and done. I'm not just bringing you on the show to talk to you for
that sounds great.
A little while, and then we're never going to hear from Justin Corbin ever again. This has to be an ongoing thing, because now that we've done this, one, we're not afraid of it, and two, now you're going to go home and you're going to think, oh man, I wish I would have told John this and this and this. Next time I talk to him, I want to throw this out there.
Right. That sounds great. Just to that story there, some of the best stories, I think, listening and learning from some of these guys that have been doing this a long time, and we're at this transition where some of the guys that have been doing this type of airline flying, are coming up retirement, right? And a whole nother generation that's coming in, and starting to do this flying.
Are you worried about this new generation coming in? Because you're kind of between.
Not so much, no. I mean, we're getting into an environment, where some of these guys they learned on these NDB approaches, fix to fix or beacon to beacon type stuff. Like the guys flying around in Southeast Alaska, really challenging area, and this is before GPS and RNP and LPV type approaches, and they're flying airliners around in this environment, and it's just incredible to listen to some of those stories. Where now, you've got these RNP approaches, that can you can fly Cat 3 to. And even here, around the Pacific Northwest, a small regional airline, flying turboprop airplanes around to all these different destinations scheduled.
Yeah.
It's just incredible on how we've progressed, your safety aspect of it, how far we've come. Right?
But from a pilot standpoint, from an experience standpoint, these new kids, you start talking about NDB approaches and their eyes glaze because they've never
because it's all
been in that
GPS overlay, right?
Exactly.
What is that? Yeah. Does that? You could say, hey, the guys that just a dead reckoning their entire life, and
right.
all of a sudden now we're going to start flying radio beacons. Okay, is that the same? I mean, is that natural progression with aviation? As long as the guys know the machine, know the limits, know their capabilities, I don't see any issues with the newer generation coming out. I mean, it's their time.
The way that I would, if I had to relate it to a different discipline. You grew up about the same time I did. I think you're only about 3 or 4 years behind me.
Yeah, pushing 40 here. So.
Yeah, so we probably would have been in high school together. So you remember when computers were new,
mm-hmm.
and people got into programming basic computers, and then computers kept advancing.
Right.
And you probably had a few friends that were programmers. Maybe you programmed. I don't know. I never got into programming, but I knew kids who did. And as the technology advanced, they advanced with the technology. I have a cousin who lives on the west side that programs, I think, for T-Mobile. And he started in his basement just with basic programming. And now he's writing code for cell phone companies that, does stuff. I don't know. I'm not a programmer. And to me, that's kind of how the old guard with aviation transitioned. They started very basic nav aids that then progressed. The technology progressed as they advanced through aviation until they got to, GPS was a thing. When my dad learned to fly, NDBs were it, and then VORs came out, and then RNAV RNAV navigation came out, and then GPS came out, and so he got to progress through all this. The kids coming out now, there's nothing beyond GPS. It's just GPS. Right. We're going to show you how a VOR works, so you know. And I think about 10 years ago they quit talking about NDBs. I don't even think there are NDBs down here in the lower 48. I think they're all up in Canada and Alaska.
Yeah, a lot of them being deactivated.
And they're even talking about deactivating VORs now because everything's GPS based.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids coming out now, it's kind of like the kids that never learned to program, never learned a PC, they just were handed an iPhone, and here's how the technology works. Just utilize the technology without a basic understanding of what's underlying all of this. And that's the thing that I worry about these new pilots, is that if the box fails, they don't know what's outside the box. Whereas you, like you're saying, you have this functional understanding of, I can utilize the box to do this much. But outside the box, I have also these other tools that I can utilize to do more than that if I need to. And that's why I wonder if you're worried about these new, because you're seeing some of these guys come in now that have no experience outside the little GPS box. Are you able to convey to them more information than just that? Or, I mean, what's your experience with that?
Not too much. I think some of the guys guys and gals that have been coming through and working through the the different flight programs and building time and getting their licenses do have a little bit more of the understanding. What's it take to have different GPS resolution, how many satellite, some of this background in what it takes to be able to get the accuracy that's needed
right.
to be able to do these approaches. And I think that's the background information or knowledge that's needed to be able to progress with that.
Are you finding that they're still comfortable even when the technology fails? Is basically my question.
Well, but does it, right? There's so much redundancy there.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, if we had a large, satellite outage, then yeah, to be determined.
Right.
And then do we go back to, ground-based nav aids, which,
right.
Probably should always be, some sort of backup to it.
No, you're not wrong. I can't put all my eggs in the GPS basket.
Yeah.
There's
Well,
there's
once
gotta
you
be.
do some flying in that environment, you'll see that it's pretty robust. And so, all the guys, even younger than me, that have been coming up in it, learning and progressing and getting to the point where they're at in their career flying professionally, I would have no issue putting myself or my family in an airplane with them.
That's good. That's good to hear. Should we stick a fork in it?
Yeah.
Are we? I think we've
Yeah,
run all our.
with the citation jet starting up over there is a good time to.
I think we've run all our points out.
Yeah. On to the next time.
I'm excited to talk again. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, sir.